Okay, we're going to try something new this time and put the microphone right here. See if that helps my audio. Today we are reviewing No Roses in June. Sorry, my daughter painted my nails. Half of them are navy blue. And this is what it looks like. I like that she's touching a horse. That's not something that she really enjoys doing in the book. She was terrified by horses as a young girl. So it's kind of an interesting choice that they decided to make. But you do you, Harlequin. You do you. I would like to talk a little bit about how Stoicism shows up in this book. S.E. Summers is a huge fan of sort of the Stoic path, and her characters are often silent when they should be speaking, or long suffering when maybe they could get out of that long suffering a little bit quicker. And we're just going to see how this plays out in this title. Our two principals are Fiona MacDonald and Edward Campbell, and I think it's actually kind of cute that they have last names that play off an ancient Scottish rivalry among clans. And here they are two, a Campbell and a MacDonald, fighting it out, but love will win. Anyway, so the first instance of Stoicism I want to bring up is when Fiona does not explain. So Fiona has been caught in a somewhat compromising position. She is wearing a very tight, very low-cut dress, and she's in kind of a gin joint and having a wild, crazy time. Of course, we know that she's been heartbroken. Just that morning, her fiancé flew in from South Africa just to break her heart and to tell her that the wedding's off. I actually find it really interesting that he flew all that way because the girl that he married was living nearby him in South Africa. So I don't know, maybe it was doing the right thing to fly all that way, but me, I would have sent a telegram and avoided the whole awkward conversation. But she has gone out to this bar with this kind of lounge lizard greasy guy, and she's caught by her hero, and he judges her so harshly for being in this situation. He thinks that she's just totally wasted. She at one point passes out sort of in his arms, and he thinks this is a totally worthless individual. Later, when she shows up in New Zealand as his brand new governess, she's also sporting a black eye because she was involved in a brawl. She did not start it. It was not her fault. Anyway, but she declines to explain herself very much. In the face of his judgment, she just sort of retreats into this inner shell and sort of takes up one of my favorite sayings, never complain and never explain. Just sort of ride it out and wait for time to vindicate her. And I love that at the end, Edward says in his proposal that he doesn't know why she was there in that joint, looking the way she did and dancing with who she was, appearing to be drunk. He doesn't care, that he knows what her character is now, and that whatever came before, he can't explain it, but he knows that she's a good person. And at that point, you realize that all of his misconceptions have been flipped on their head, and Fiona has been rewarded for her silence. Now, I don't know that I would actually recommend this in real life. I'm a big fan of knowing the context of things, but in this case, it's kind of wonderful to see that the just win their just rewards, right? Another case of Stoicism maybe being carried too far is with the character, her name is Phoebe Trudington, and she is described as Victorian by Edward. She's sort of, I say sort of old because I don't think she's even 50. But she sort of sounds like she's 80. She lives at the sheep station, and she's going to act as chaperone to the wayward Miss Campbell and straighten her up, Edward thinks. Well, one of the reasons that she can look the part is because she dresses sort of like a Victorian. She sits in a chair, very arthritic, really struggles to help with any of the household chores. Her hair is in these like really bizarre it almost sounded like buns. I don't know. Now that I say that out loud, I think, did I really read that? But I want to say she actually had buns. And Fiona discovers later that she had lost the love of her life because her mother had been an alcoholic, and she didn't feel that she could marry a reverend and also keep her mother's secret. And so she decides to let him go. That's not the only thing that sort of sends her into this sort of like cramped, crabbed existence. She was also robbed, I think, by a nephew or something. And she's lost heart. And you can see it. She's just sort of suffering through life. Again, sort of evidence of this stoic nature, but carried too far in this case and not given its proper perspective. I love that Fiona's path to redemption also lies through giving Trudy a makeover. She cuts her hair. She gives her regular massages that help loosen up her muscles, which is not actually how arthritis is cured finally, but okay, we're just going to go with it. She also like sews her some new clothes. She really gives her new lease on life and shows her that there's life after these setbacks. And it's so gratifying in the end when she has her old beau show up and marry her out of hand. It's just wonderful. The third example of this is Fiona's decision to stay if Edward ends up marrying somebody else. It would be heartbreaking, and you're made to feel that it would be extremely heartbreaking if she has to watch Edward, who's the love of her life, get married and be happy with another woman. But she discovers that this other woman that she thinks Edward is interested in is also a racist. This woman sort of comes into the sheep station and is very patronizing to the young charges, the half Maori, half Scots children that Fiona is taking care of. And she's very conscious of her position and her privilege, and she wants to eat dinner at the fancy table, not with the Maori farm hands. She's doing that constantly. And I love actually this wonderful sense of love and devotion that Fiona has when she decides that if Edward gets married, she can't cut and run like she did when Ian jilted her. She has to stay. For the sake of the children, she's going to stay, and she's going to protect them from a potentially ruinous stepmother and domestic situation. She's going to put herself in between the racist and these beautiful babies. So I really, like I said, I really like the themes of Stoicism playing out through these books. It's a personality trait I find interesting because I am like the last person in the whole wide world to be stoic. Like I've always told my kids, like if I were on a wagon train, headed west from Independence, Missouri, my wagon train would abandon me in the middle of the night in Nebraska because I was whining that badly. Like I am not stoic by nature, and I admire it so much. And I think that that's what gives me such pleasure when I read these books is it shows me sort of the better way. Not always the better way, but, like don't say the thing that you want to say. Don't throw the tantrum you want to throw. Take what life has dished out and just make the best of it. Make the best of the loaf that you have. So that's the end of that discussion. Some extras that I really enjoyed in this book are there's a horse incident. I told you at the beginning that Fiona does not like horses. She's actually got on the back of her neck a big mark from a hoof. When she was a child, she was pushed into a stable by a evil schoolmate and trampled under the foot of this terrifying wild stallion. And I find it really weird that S.C. Summers makes the person who pushed her in just this anonymous, totally homicidal schoolmate when she could have used the character of Maddie. Maddie is Fiona's ex-fiance's new wife and an old schoolmate of of Fiona, and she lived with the family for a lot of years after she was orphaned. And I just like the idea that, like, if we're gonna hate her already, let's do one of those things like they have in Power Rangers. You know, my kids watch Power Rangers, and each of the Power Rangers do their thing, and then at the end of the show, they all have to like use all of their Power Ranger stuff together and then become a super Power Ranger. And I'm just saying it would have been much more pleasant and enjoyable to hate Maddie if she had also been the person who'd shoved Fiona in the path of a terrifying horse. I don't understand it. I actually want to rewrite it mentally so that happens. So, okay, in my version of No Roses in June, that's what happens. Another thing is Essie Summers' generosity with her fellow Harlequin authors. She mentions Joyce Dingwell a couple of times in this book, and much was made in her autobiography of the correspondence she had with Joyce Dingwell and the friendship. But she's just unstinting with it. She uses little bits and bobs from classical literature, but she also uses her contemporaries. Whenever she finds something really wonderful or noteworthy, she'll include it, and she will always make sure to attribute it. She's not behindhand, even when it's a little weird stylistically. You know, they're like, oh, that is the poem by Australian author Joyce Dingwell. You know, it's a little stilted, but it sort of tells me how generous in nature Essie was and how very scrupulous she was about the use. The third and last thing is opal jewelry. That's what Fiona was getting from Ian for her wedding ring, was an opal engagement ring. And then later much is made of an opal necklace that is sent to her by Ian because he just, he'd already bought it. He had it lying around before he conducted an illicit passion for her stepsister. So I just find it really interesting because I don't like opal jewelry. Like, it's very strange. And I see it as a thing repeated a weird amount of times in Harlequins of this vintage. Like, opals. There's a lot of other things. Opals. Anyway, that's the end of my thoughts on No Roses in June. You're going to want to read this one. It's got a lot of wonderful scenes, and you can catch the rest of my written review over at the Uncrushable Jersey Dress. Thanks.